Hi, everybody. So, my story starts from the beginning when I was born. So, my mom decided to start a business in Beijing. And while this decision was happening, I was born into the world. And I was born to a relatively privileged family where we didn't have any money worries. And I remember we were one of the first families to have a car while there were more bicycles on the road. 3.5 years later, after I was born, my little brother was born. And our family is of Korean and Japanese descent. So my grandmother was a professor teaching at one of the top universities in Beijing, teaching Japanese. And my grandfather was a general in the army, although he passed away a year before I was born. So I never really knew him. But the way that he was definitely left a big impact in the family, in the way that we operated. So my brother and we were born into a family of high expectations and high standards, as you can imagine. And, we had an educator and a general that basically set the tone for my mom and how she was brought up. So we were really expected to earn everything and do everything with our own abilities. So one of the things that I would say I remember really distinctly was when my mom actually starved me and commanded our nanny not to feed me anything until I finished homework that she left me. And this was even before elementary school started. So as you can imagine, once school actually started, I realized, hey, it's a piece of cake. And I did really well in school, and, her Nazi ways really proved to be effective. So I was really never a soft child when I was growing up. And, I didn't act cute, or I didn't, whine and cry and do all these childlike things, because nobody in my family really did those things. And I think as a child, you look around at your surroundings and at your parents and how they react. And nobody ever gave us the time of day when we did those things. So we were really living our lives, my brother and I, navigating through logic, and it was like military style life, and we more so wanted to prove our worth to our parents through the various things that we did. And I think that's why such a big impact on me as, even as a love language, the acts of service. And for me at the time, I didn't know how else to prove my worth to my parents other than just to do well in school. So even then, nothing I did, it was ever really praised, and it was all just expected because, it doesn't matter what I won, what kind of scholastic contest that I won, it doesn't matter because my mom always said that, it's a student's responsibility and it's your duty to do well in school. So unlike many others that were afraid of their dads, I was, quite deathly afraid of my mom. My dad, on the other hand, was actually funny, he's generous, and he's just a great guy all around. Very much of a pearl sapphire, and he never really needed anything, never asked for anything, and he was kind of the pillar and the glue of the family. And, as I grew older, I would see and hear a lot of people say, how mean your mom is and how she's too much of a disciplinarian. And I would say my family members would even comment on how my mom is raising us. And my mom never really batted an eye. She looks like a lamb. She looks very deceiving for the tiger mom that she is. And she looks like she can't hurt a fly, but really she is an iron woman. And then we moved to Canada when I was 10 years old. And I saw the gap further and further between my relationship with my mom and other kids' relationship with their moms. I saw that they were getting hugs and kisses from their moms, and they were getting, praised for getting like C's and B's in class. And some of them were even getting money for getting A's, and it was like a huge celebration. And I thought this was your duty. This was your responsibility as a student. And how come I never got called and got praised for all these things that I did? And, it was just pulling teeth. And I never even heard my mom say, I love you or give us a hug ever, even up until when I was 10. And, slowly but certainly, I began to really resent my mother. And while I was still scared of her, I was really determined to start making my own decisions and making my own life happen. So I started my first job when I was 15 years old, and I went to apply at Safeway. I totally didn't think I was going to get the job, and I did the application. I filled it out. I was 15 minutes away on my way home on a bus, and Safeway called me, and I got the job, and I started working there. And I really think they actually just got me there because of diversity, because everybody else was white. So it was like by luck, I guess. But, I was the right person at the right time. And I remember distinctly that I went in and they told me to memorize all these codes for fruits and vegetables. And I did. And they had this test and I did it and I got 100%. And they were shocked. They were like, oh my gosh, nobody ever got 100% on this test. And I was kind of thinking to myself, like, you work here. Shouldn't everybody be getting 100% before they get the job? But I digress. So from then on, I held many part-time jobs throughout my school and throughout my high school career, as well as, just pretty much until I got my first real job. My parents never really paid for our clothes or our entertainment or anything like that, other than just more of just food and shelter was kind of provided to us. We never really had any money worries though. My brother and I we weren't kids that wanted all these toys and all these snacks and all these different things, because I think a lot of our necessities were provided to us in good quality. So we weren't really looking for things like in quantity, I guess. And we, for my brother and I, we were more so focused on just our life versus just the materialistic things, because we weren't too worried about that, I guess, in a way. But we always discuss this ourselves, and we have this term where we tell people that we were actually brought up in artificial poverty. So that's kind of how we describe our childhood experience, is that, while my parents had money, we weren't given like a lavish life or anything of any means like that. We were expected to work for our money. We were expected to do things and earn everything. And my brother and I were, we were quite popular in school. We had lots of friends, but we're always very cautious to bring them home, because we knew that they were not going to be able to live up to the expectations that my parents had, in terms of, having good manners, keeping clean when they're over, and just, things that I think regular Canadian kids wouldn't be thinking about, versus my parents will always be very concerned with the way that we are and how we, our manners and the way that we portrayed ourselves and all those things. So, we could cry and whine and make noises all we want, but basically we'll just never get whatever we want in that way. We were more so taught life lessons with logic. We were, we sat down and had discussions. Sounds pretty crazy now to think about, when you're 12 years old, you have these discussions about life and what's right and wrong. But, I think that was what taught us to make hard decisions and to differentiate what is right versus wrong at a young age. And we were never beat, no physical violence ever was really, there was really no physical violence in our life. And, that was never really the answer for us. And I think it was more mental torment. We were always the very mature kids on the block. We were always the polite ones. And that's just how we were. And I think going into university was when I had the toughest time. And my mom gave me a modest budget of $600 a month to look for housing near school, because we lived quite far away from UBC. And she would not be supporting me in any other capacity other than the $600 a month. So, while I was going to school, I was working a part-time job in retail, and I had to apply for student loans. And when I moved out at 19, basically that was like all of that was my finances. So my parents thought that, white families kick their kids out when they're 16 or 18 or whatever, and it was just normal. So like 19 is like one more year more than 18, so you should be able to do this. And that, they grew up, like they left their family at a very young age, so this is a good experience and you'll be fine. So I remember the days when I would buy like $7 Chinese food and have to save it for 2 to 3 meals because I needed to budget my expenses because I wasn't really earning much at a part-time job that was paying me minimum wages. And I was at a full course load studying cell genetics and in biology. And, I had basically just 1 or 2 days in the week to actually go to work. And I never bought any like meat or anything while I lived alone because, I had to cook it, and I would have to cook the same things for many days and eat it for many, many days in a row just so that it doesn't go bad. So I think, comparing to maybe the people that are less fortunate, they might not think this is anything at all. But to me, I thought, why would my mom let me go through this when we didn't need to? And I was looking at her and I was seeing her, she was buying her LV bags and she was buying her, expensive furniture while I was basically struggling. And I thought, why is she like that? My dad would slip me a $20 bill or like a $10 bill here and there when we have our occasional dinner. But my mom would never ask how I was doing or even, like, of course, she would never send me money, but she would never even send me like the occasional text to be like, hey, how's it going? And for me, I never talk back to my parents, like my brother as well, where I think that's just the traditional household that we grew up in. But at one point, I was basically like at a point where I said, even if I had to live outside in a box, I would never ask her to support me because I just did not want to owe her anything. And, that was a really low point in my life. And there was a lot going on. And I felt very victimized. And, even at that point, I think the humanization of having understanding from your family, like from my dad's warmth really kept me going. In all those days in university when I was living by myself with like this horrendous roommate, and I was going through some tough times just in relationships, and I think my dad really kind of held it together for me and kind of was the bridge between my mom and I, and my brother, of course. My brother and I are very close, and he was kind of also there kind of having conversations with me to talk things through. And it was during the third year of my university career when I was going through a really hard time with my first serious relationship with this boy, where I thought, oh my gosh, I love this person. But yeah, it's the first relationship. And I also wanted to switch majors because I just didn't love cell biology and genetics, if you can imagine. So I didn't know who to call. So then I ended up calling my parents, and I remember very clearly that it was a cold winter night and it was raining really hard outside. And I was renting a basement with my roommate in a house where the floors were not even level. And my parents showed up. Despite their long work day and being 2 cities away, they showed up and they were at my doorstep. And at that time, my dad was still adamant in saying, like, I cannot give up my science major because, I have to go on since I already did 2 years of it. Don't waste this time. And at that moment was when my mom actually sat down, listened, and really supported my decision. And she said, if this is not where your heart is and this is not what you want to study, it makes sense with your skill set to study something else that you're really good and you're passionate about, which was English language. So for those of you who don't know, English language is like the study of rhetoric, not English literature, which is like Shakespeare and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to basically study rhetoric and perhaps look into law and look into that side of things. But at the end of the day, I sat down, thought it through, and I decided to still go with finishing my science degree. But I have a minor in English. So best of both worlds, I guess, in a certain way. And they also talked me through my relationship, which I was having a really tough time with. And they gave me some really great advice on how to handle myself through that relationship and having the right mindset during that time. So, after university, I went to visit my grandma, and she told me many, many stories about my mom that I would have never known or guessed. And I began to understand more about the reason, about the way that she is, and how much tougher that she had it when she was growing up. And, now fast forward to my career at the bank. Throughout my banking career, I also had so many ups and downs. And, at any given point when I was feeling down, I could reach out to my parents for guidance, and they would always have my back. And what I mean by having my back is not just telling me words of encouragement, but actually being there for me. And even at one point, reaching out and letting me move back home for a while. So I think looking back at my life now, all of my successes, my discipline, my ability to make tough decisions in the face of adversity, and my personality overall is all because of my mom and my parents' parenting. And I think she was my ultimate mentor, and I never even knew it. I used to say that I never wanted to be like my mom, ever. As I grew older, more and more people say that we're very similar in so many ways and even have the same voice. And at my wedding, I actually publicly told people during one of my speeches that if I could be even half the person that she is, I'd be honored to have walked this earth. And I think the sacrifices that mothers make to their children, to live the life that they didn't even know that they could have, is just unfathomable. And at this moment, I think I challenge you to take a moment to reach out to your moms if they're still around. Reach out, have a conversation, FaceTime them if you're far away, or give them a hug if you're living with them. And nowadays I'm able to take my mom out to have high tea and at a nice West End neighborhood where I work at my own hours, because I'm able to. And I'm able to treat her with the money that I earn myself. And, I think this all comes down to just everything that she brought me up with. And, I'm really grateful to have my family, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. So I think this is ultimately the full circle to my story with my mom and my mentor for life. And I hope to see you this Sunday. Don't be late.